The wind cut through the Chicago streets like a knife that February evening. Most people hurried past with their heads down, clutching their coats tight against the cold. Nobody wanted to be outside longer than they had to be, but there was one person who had nowhere warm to go. A young girl stood across the street from Bella Notte, one of the fanciest Italian restaurants in downtown Chicago. She couldn't have been more than 14 or 15 years old. Her jacket was too thin for the weather, and you could see she'd been wearing the same clothes for days. Her brown hair hung in tangles around her face, and her sneakers had holes in them that let the cold seep right through to her socks. But the thing that stood out most was the violin case she carried. It was old and battered, covered in scratches and worn at the edges. She held it close to her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. The girl's name was Maya, and she hadn't eaten a real meal in 3 days. Sure, she'd managed to get half a sandwich someone left on a bench yesterday, and a kind woman at a coffee shop had given her a muffin that morning, but her stomach felt like it was eating itself from the inside out. She was so hungry that she felt dizzy when she stood up too fast. Maya had been standing outside that restaurant for almost 20 minutes, trying to build up the courage to go inside. Through the big glass windows, she could see families laughing together. Couples held hands across candlelit tables. Waiters in crisp white shirts carried steaming plates of pasta and pizza. The warm yellow light spilling out onto the cold street made everything inside look like a dream. She knew what would happen when she walked in there. She'd tried this at other places before. Sometimes they'd yell at her right away. Sometimes they'd call the police. Once, a manager had thrown a glass of water at her and told her to get lost. But Maya was desperate enough to try again. Taking a deep breath that turned to fog in the freezing air, she crossed the street and pushed open the heavy door. The warmth hit her first. Then the smells: fresh baked bread, garlic and tomatoes, cheese melting on pizza straight from the oven. Her stomach twisted so hard it hurt. A man in a fancy black suit stood at a podium near the entrance. He looked up from his reservation book, and his welcoming smile vanished the second he saw her. His eyes traveled from her dirty sneakers up to her tangled hair, and his face went from friendly to cold in about 2 seconds. "I'm sorry, but we don't allow solicitors in here," he said, already moving around the podium to escort her out. "You need to leave right now." Maya's voice came out smaller than she wanted it to. "Please, sir, I'm not asking for money. I just want to know if I can play my violin for the guests. Just one song, and if people like it, maybe I could have something to eat." The man's expression didn't soften even a little bit. "Absolutely not. This is a respectable establishment. Now please leave before I have to call someone to remove you." But Maya's question had been loud enough that several nearby tables had heard. A group of businessmen in expensive suits looked over, and one of them laughed. Did she just ask to play for food? What is this, the Middle Ages? His friends joined in the laughter. "Maybe she'll juggle next," another one said, and they all thought that was hilarious. Maya felt her face burn with shame, but she didn't move. She couldn't. This was her last chance today. If she left now, she'd be sleeping in a subway station with her stomach empty again. "Please," she said again, louder this time. "Just one song. If nobody likes it, I'll leave right away. I promise." The restaurant manager had heard the commotion now and came striding over. He was a big man in his 50s with graying hair and a stern face. His name tag said Mr. Romano. He looked like the kind of person who didn't tolerate any nonsense in his restaurant. "What's going on here?" he demanded, looking from his host to Maya. "This girl wants to beg for food," the host explained quickly. "I was just escorting her out." "I'm not begging," Maya said, and there was a tiny spark of pride in her voice despite everything. "I'm offering to play music." "That's different." Mr. Romano crossed his arms. "Young lady, this is not a street corner. We have a certain atmosphere to maintain here. Our guests come here for a quiet, elegant dining experience. They don't come here for entertainment they didn't ask for." More diners were watching now. Some looked annoyed at the disruption. Others looked uncomfortable, like they felt bad but didn't want to get involved. A few looked at Maya with outright disgust, like she was something dirty that had wandered in off the street. "Security is on the way," the host said quietly to Mr. Romano. Maya felt tears starting to burn behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of all these people who were already looking at her like she was nothing. But then something unexpected happened. An elderly woman sitting at a corner, table with what looked like her family raised her hand. She was tiny and had white hair pulled back in a neat bun. Despite her age, her eyes were sharp and bright. "Antonio," she called out in a thick Italian accent. "Come here for a moment." Mr. Romano's whole expression changed. "Mama, is everything all right?" So this was his mother. She gestured for him to come closer, and when he did, she spoke to him in rapid Italian. Maya couldn't understand the words, but she could hear the tone. The old woman sounded firm, like she was giving orders rather than making suggestions. Mr. Romano tried to argue back in Italian, but his mother cut him off with a sharp gesture. She said something else, pointing at Maya, then at her own chest. Whatever she said made Mr. Romano's face soften just a little bit. He sighed heavily and turned back to Maya. "My mother says I should give you a chance. One song, just one. If the guests like it, you can have a meal. If they don't, or if you can't play well, you leave immediately. No arguments. Understood?" Maya nodded so hard she felt dizzy. "Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet," Mr. Romano said. "Thank my mother. She's the only reason you're still standing here." Maya looked over at the old woman, who gave her a small nod and the tiniest hint of a smile. "Well, go ahead then," Mr. Romano said impatiently. "You can stand over there in the corner. Make it quick." Maya walked to the spot he'd indicated on shaky legs. She could feel every single pair of eyes in the restaurant on her. The businessmen were still smirking, clearly expecting her to fail. The host looked annoyed that he'd have to listen to this. Other diners had already gone back to their conversations, completely uninterested. With trembling fingers, Maya set her case down and opened it. The violin inside looked almost as worn as the case. The wood was scratched and the varnish was wearing off in places. But it had been her father's violin, and before that, his father's. It was the only thing she had left of her old life. She lifted it carefully and positioned it under her chin. Her hands were shaking from cold and hunger and nervousness. She raised the bow. This was it. Everything depended on the next few minutes. Maya's bow touched the strings and the first note came out shaky and weak. Her fingers felt numb from the cold and her arm trembled as she drew the bow across. The sound wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. One of the businessmen snorted. "Oh boy, here we go." Another one leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed, a smug smile on his face. "I give her about 30 seconds before Romano kicks her out." Their laughter was quiet, but Maya heard it anyway. She heard everything. The clinking of silverware as people went back to eating. The murmur of conversations resuming. The way most of the diners had already dismissed her completely. Her second note was even worse than the first. The bow slipped slightly and made a scratching sound that made someone wince. Maya felt her face burning hot with embarrassment. Her hands were shaking so badly now that she could barely hold the instrument steady. This was a mistake. A huge mistake. She should have just left when she had the chance. But then she closed her eyes. When her eyes shut, the restaurant disappeared. The watching faces disappeared. The cold and the hunger and the fear all faded into the background. In that darkness behind her eyelids, Maya went somewhere else entirely. She went back to her family's living room 3 years ago. She was 11 years old and her father was sitting in his favorite armchair, the one with the worn armrest where he always rested his coffee. Her mother was in the kitchen making dinner and the smell of her famous lasagna filled the whole house. "Remember, sweetheart," her father had said that day, watching her practice. "The violin doesn't make the music. You do. The violin is just wooden strings. But you have a soul. You have feelings. You have stories to tell. When you play, don't think about your fingers or the notes on the page. Think about what you want to say. Think about what you want people to feel." Maya had been frustrated that day because she kept messing up a difficult passage. "But what if I'm not good enough, Papa?" Her father had smiled that warm smile of his. "You're always good enough when you play from your heart. Technical perfection is nice, but it's empty without emotion. Make people feel something, Maya. That's what real music does." Standing in that corner of Bellinota with everyone waiting for her to fail, Maya made a choice. She stopped thinking about her shaking hands. She stopped thinking about the hunger gnawing at her stomach. She stopped thinking about the businessmen laughing at her. Instead, she thought about her parents. She thought about everything she'd lost. She thought about the cold nights sleeping in subway stations. She thought about the loneliness that sat in her chest like a heavy stone. She thought about how desperately she missed having someone to talk to, someone to care if she was okay. And then she played, The third note that came from her violin was completely different from the first two. It was clear and pure and somehow heartbreaking. She was playing Vivaldi's Winter from the Four Seasons, a piece her father had loved. Her bow moved across the strings with sudden confidence. Her fingers found their positions without her even thinking about it. This was muscle memory built from thousands of hours of practice, from years of training at one of the best music schools in the country. The notes began to flow like water, like they'd been trapped inside her and were finally breaking free. Fast passages that should have been difficult came out effortless. The violin sang in her hands, each note crystal clear and full of emotion. A woman at a nearby table stopped with her fork halfway to her mouth. She set it down slowly, her eyes fixed on Maya. The businessman who'd been laughing earlier stopped mid-sentence. His smile faded. He leaned forward slightly, his head tilted like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. One by one, conversations died away. The clinking of silverware stopped. Even the waiters froze in place, holding their trays completely caught up in the music. Maya's whole body moved with the piece. She swayed slightly, her bow arm flowing up and down in smooth arcs. Her left hand danced up and down the fingerboard so fast it was almost a blur. But every single note was perfect. Every single note meant something. The music told a story. It spoke of winter's cold harshness, of struggling to survive, of beauty found in the darkest times. The fast sections rushed like wind and snow. The slow sections ached with loneliness. And somehow Maya poured every bit of her own story into it without saying a single word. A woman in a designer dress had tears streaming down her face. She didn't even bother to wipe them away. Mr. Romano stood completely still near the kitchen door, his mouth slightly open. He'd been ready to throw this homeless girl out of his restaurant 60 seconds ago. Now he couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but listen. His mother had her wrinkled hands clasped together near her heart. Her eyes were closed and she was nodding slowly, a peaceful smile on her face. She'd known. Somehow she'd known. The businessmen weren't laughing anymore. Not even close. One of them had gone pale. Another had his hand over his mouth, his eyes wide. The one who'd made the bet about how badly she'd play was staring at Maya like he'd just seen a ghost. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, had climbed down from her chair and walked closer to where Maya stood. Her parents reached for her but then stopped, letting her go. The little girl stood there watching with wonder on her face, completely mesmerized. The music built and built, the notes climbing higher and faster. Maya's fingers flew across the strings in passages that most professional violinists found challenging. But she wasn't thinking about the difficulty. She was thinking about her father teaching her this piece. She was thinking about her mother applauding from the kitchen. She was thinking about everything beautiful she'd ever known and everything painful she'd experienced since losing it all. And then came the final section, the part that always made her father smile. The notes cascaded down like snowflakes, each one delicate and perfect. The tempo slowed. The volume dropped to barely a whisper. The violin's voice became soft and tender, like a lullaby, like a memory of home. Maya drew out the final note, letting it hang in the air. She held it until her bow ran out, until the very last vibration faded into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The restaurant was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Maya slowly lowered her violin and opened her eyes. She'd been so lost in the music that she'd forgotten where she was. Now reality came rushing back. The restaurant, the watching faces, the fact that she was still hungry and homeless and alone. She looked around nervously, suddenly scared again. Had it been good enough? Would they let her stay? Then someone started clapping. It was Mr. Romano's mother. She was on her feet, her old hands coming together in firm, decisive applause. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling the biggest smile Maya had ever seen. Then someone else stood up. The woman in the designer dress. She was clapping too and crying, and she put her fingers to her lips and let out a whistle. Then another person stood. And another. And another. Within seconds, the entire restaurant was on its feet. Every single person was clapping. Some were crying. Some were cheering. The businessmen who'd laughed at her were clapping harder than anyone, their faces red with shame and amazement. The sound was thunderous. It echoed off the walls and filled every corner of the restaurant. Maya stood there in shock, still holding her father's old violin, unable to process what was happening. The little girl who'd walked closer, ran up and hugged Maya's legs. "That was the most beautiful thing I ever heard," she said. Maya's vision blurred with tears. For the first time in 6 months, someone had seen her. Really seen her. Not as a homeless kid or a problem to be dealt with, but as a person, as an artist, as someone with value. Mr. Romano walked toward her slowly, and Maya tensed up, worried he was still going to kick her out. But when he reached her, he had tears on his face too. "Young lady," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "I think we need to talk." The applause was still going when Mr. Romano gently took Maya's arm and guided her toward the back of the restaurant. Maya's legs felt like jelly. She clutched her violin case tight, half expecting this to be some kind of trick, that he was just leading her to the back door to throw her out quietly. But instead, he brought her to a small table near the kitchen and pulled out a chair. "Sit," he said softly. "Please." Maya sat down slowly, not taking her eyes off him. She'd learned not to trust kindness too easily. Sometimes people acted nice just to make themselves feel good, and then they'd change their minds. Mr. Romano snapped his fingers at a passing waiter. "Bring soup." The minestrone. And bread. Fresh bread, the kind we just took out, and water. Quickly. The waiter nodded and rushed off. Mr. Romano sat down across from Maya, and for a long moment, he just looked at her, really looked at her. Not with disgust or pity, but with something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or concern. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked finally. Maya's voice came out scratchy. She realized she'd barely spoken to anyone in days. "Juilliard. I was a student there. On scholarship." Mr. Romano's eyebrows shot up. "Juilliard? In New York?" Maya nodded. The waiter returned with a steaming bowl of soup and a basket of bread that smelled like heaven. Maya stared at it but didn't move. Sometimes people would put food in front of her and then snatch it away as a joke. It had happened twice before. "Eat," Mr. Romano said, pushing the bowl closer. "Please, you look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks." Maya picked up the spoon with a shaking hand. She took a small sip of the soup, and her eyes immediately filled with tears. It was warm and rich and delicious. It was the most wonderful thing she'd ever tasted. She tried to eat slowly to have some dignity, but she was so hungry that she couldn't help herself. She started eating faster, shoving bread in her mouth between spoonfuls of soup. Mr. Romano watched her with a pained expression. "When did you last eat?" "I had half a muffin this morning," Maya said between bites. "Before that, maybe 2 days ago. I'm not sure anymore. The days kind of blend together." "And you're living on the streets?" Maya nodded, not looking up from her soup. She didn't want to see the pity in his eyes. "How old are you?" 14. "Almost 15. Mr. Romano cursed softly in Italian. "Does anyone know where you are? Parents? Family?" That's when Maya's composure finally broke. The tears that had been threatening to fall since she walked in the door finally came. They ran down her dirty cheeks and dripped into her soup. "They're dead," she whispered. "Car accident. 6 months ago. It was raining and a truck ran a red light and—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Mr. Romano reached across the table and put his hand over hers. He didn't say anything. Sometimes there's nothing to say. Maya wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I didn't have any other family. No grandparents, no aunts or uncles. They put me in foster care, but the family was... They weren't good people, so I ran. I thought I could take care of myself. I thought I could keep going to school and everything would be okay. But it didn't work like that." She laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Turns out you can't be a Juilliard student when you don't have a place to live or a way to pay for things. They were nice about it. Said I could come back when my situation improved. But how is my situation supposed to improve when I'm living in subway stations?" Mr. Romano looked like he wanted to say something. But before he could, there was a commotion near the front of the restaurant. The woman in the designer dress was walking toward them, and she wasn't alone. Several other diners were following her, including the businessmen who'd laughed at Maya earlier. "Excuse me," the woman said breathlessly. Her makeup was smeared from crying. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I had to come talk to you." She looked at Maya with an intensity that was almost frightening. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Maya," she said quietly. The woman's hand flew to her mouth. She actually stumbled backward a step, and her husband, who was standing behind her, caught her arm to steady her. "Maya," the woman repeated, her voice shaking. "Maya what? What's your last name?" "Chen. Maya Chen." The woman made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Oh my God, Catherine and David's daughter. You're Catherine and David's daughter. Maya's head snapped up. You knew my parents? Knew them? The woman's voice was getting higher and more emotional. Katie was my roommate in college. We were best friends for years. We lost touch about 7 years ago when my work got crazy and we moved to Chicago. I kept meaning to reach out, but life just got away from me. And then She stopped, pressing her hand to her mouth again. You knew my mom? Maya stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. You really knew her? The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face again. I was at your parents' wedding. I held you when you were a baby. Katie used to send me videos of you playing violin. She was so proud of you. She'd call me and talk for hours about your talent, about how you were going to be famous someday. Maya couldn't breathe. For 6 months she'd been completely alone in the world. No one who remembered her parents. No one who knew her story. And now, out of nowhere, here was someone who'd known her mother. Someone who'd been part of her old life. I had no idea about the accident, the woman continued, her voice breaking. I've been so buried in work. We haven't talked in years, and I didn't know. If I had known, if I had any idea you were out there alone. She stepped forward and pulled Maya into a hug. Maya stood stiffly at first, not used to being touched anymore. But then something inside her broke and she hugged back, clutching this stranger who wasn't really a stranger at all. My name is Dr. Rachel Park, the woman said, pulling back to look at Maya's face. I teach music at Northwestern University. I need you to listen to me very carefully, okay? You're not alone anymore. Do you understand? You are not alone. I don't understand, Maya said, confused and overwhelmed. Dr. Park was already pulling out her phone. My husband and I have a big house. We have a guest room that no one uses. You're going to come stay with us tonight, right now, and tomorrow we're going to figure everything else out. But you don't even know me. Not really. I was just a baby when you saw me last. I know your mother, Dr. Park said firmly. And I know that if the situation were reversed, if it was my daughter out there alone, Katie would have moved heaven and earth to help her. This isn't charity, Maya. This is family taking care of family, even if the connection got lost for a while. One of the businessmen cleared his throat. He looked deeply uncomfortable. Listen, kid. I owe you an apology. A big one. What I said earlier, the way I acted. That was wrong. Really wrong. He pulled out his wallet and took out several bills. I want to help. We all do. The other businessmen nodded, reaching for their wallets too. Other diners were coming over now, wanting to contribute, wanting to help. But Dr. Park held up her hand. That's very kind, but what Maya needs right now isn't money. It's stability. It's a home. It's someone to advocate for her. She looked at Maya again. If you'll let me, I'm going to make some phone calls. I know lawyers who handle family law. I know social workers. I know people at Juilliard. We're going to fix this. Maya felt dizzy. This was too much, too fast. An hour ago, she'd been starving and desperate. Now she had a full stomach, and a stranger was offering her a place to live and promising to fix her entire life. Why? Maya whispered. Why would you do all this for me? Dr. Park smiled through her tears. Because your mother was the best friend I ever had. Because she would have done it for me. And because no child should have to trade violin performances for dinner just to survive. She squeezed Maya's shoulders gently. You have a gift, Maya, a real gift. The world needs to hear you play. But first we need to make sure you're safe and taken care of. Mr. Romano, who'd been quiet during all of this, finally spoke up. The meal is on the house, obviously. And Maya, you're welcome here any time. You want to play for my guests every night? You do it. You want to just come eat? You do that too. My door is always open to you. His elderly mother had made her way over, and she reached up to cup Maya's dirty face in her small, wrinkled hands. She said something in Italian that Maya didn't understand, but she didn't need to. The kindness in the old woman's eyes translated perfectly. For the first time in 6 months, Maya felt something she thought she'd lost forever. She felt hope. That first night at Dr. Park's house felt like a dream Maya was afraid to wake up from. The guest room was bigger than the entire apartment she'd shared with her parents. It had a real bed with clean sheets that smelled like lavender. There was a private bathroom with hot water and towels so soft Maya almost cried when she touched them. Dr. Park's husband, James, was a lawyer. He was a quiet man with kind eyes who didn't ask too many questions. He just showed Maya where everything was and told her to help herself to anything she needed. "There's food in the kitchen anytime you're hungry," he said. "You don't have to ask permission. This is your home now for as long as you need it." Maya took the longest shower of her life that night. She watched the dirt swirl down the drain and wondered if this was real. If maybe she'd collapsed in some subway tunnel, and this was all a hallucination her brain had made up to comfort her as she froze to death. But when she came out of the bathroom wrapped in a borrowed robe, Dr. Park was waiting with a cup of hot chocolate and a gentle smile. That's when Maya knew it was real. The next morning, Dr. Park made breakfast while making phone calls. She had her phone tucked between her shoulder and ear while flipping pancakes, and Maya sat at the kitchen table listening to her work. "Yes, this is Dr. Rachel Park from Northwestern. I need to speak with Dean Morrison at Juilliard. It's urgent." "Yes, I'll hold." Then another call. "Hi, this is Rachel Park. I need a family lawyer, someone who specializes in guardianship cases. A friend referred me to you." And another. "I'm calling about a former foster care case. The child ran away 6 months ago and fell through the system. We need to fix this immediately." Maya ate her pancakes slowly, still not quite used to having food whenever she wanted it. Dr. Park worked the phone like a warrior going into battle. She was fierce and determined, and she wasn't taking no for an answer from anyone. By noon, she'd made 17 phone calls. By evening, she had appointments set up with 3 different lawyers, a meeting scheduled with a social worker, and she'd gotten through to someone important at Juilliard. "They want to do a video call with you tomorrow," Dr. Park said, sitting down at the table with her own cold cup of coffee. "Dean Morrison remembers you. He said you were one of the most talented students they'd had in years." When I told him what happened, he was devastated. Maya felt a flutter of something in her chest. Hope maybe, or fear. Do they want me to come back?" "We'll find out tomorrow. But Maya, I need you to understand something." Dr. Park reached across and took her hand. "Whatever happens, you're not going back to the streets. Even if Juilliard says no, even if this takes time to sort out legally, you have a home here. James and I have already discussed it. We want to become your legal guardians if you'll have us." Maya's throat tightened. "But you barely know me. What if I'm difficult? What if I'm too much trouble?" Dr. Park laughed softly. "Honey, I lived with your mother for 4 years in college. If you're anything like Katie, you're probably stubborn as hell and you probably leave your socks everywhere. I can handle it." That made Maya smile, really smile, for the first time in months. Mom did leave her socks everywhere. Dad used to complain about it all the time. "I know," Dr. Park said. "I was there." He'd pick them up and wave them around like evidence in a court case. Her expression turned serious. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you after they died. I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that alone." "You didn't know," Maya said quietly. "I should have known. I should have kept in better touch. But I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere." The next day's video call with Juilliard felt surreal. Maya sat in Dr. Park's home office, her hair clean and brushed, wearing borrowed clothes that actually fit. Dean Morrison's face appeared on the screen, and he looked older than Maya remembered, but his smile was the same. "Maya," he said, and his voice was warm, "it's good to see you. I wish it was under better circumstances." They talked for almost an hour. Maya explained everything that had happened. The accident, the foster home, running away, living on the streets. The dean listened to it all without interrupting, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Maya, what happened to you is a failure of multiple systems that should have protected you," he said finally, "and I include this institution in that. We should have followed up more thoroughly. We should have made sure you were okay." "It's not your fault," Maya said. "Perhaps not entirely, but we could have done better." He leaned forward. "Here's what I can tell you. Your scholarship is still available. We want you back, but there are conditions and they're non-negotiable. You need stable housing. You need a legal guardian. You need to be in counseling to process the trauma you've experienced. Music training alone isn't enough. We need to make sure you're okay as a person first." Dr. Park, who was sitting just off camera, spoke up. "Dean Morrison, this is Dr. Park. James and I are prepared to become Maya's legal guardians. We have a lawyer working on the paperwork already, and I can personally ensure she gets the counseling and support she needs." The dean nodded. "Then I think we can make this work. Maya, we'd like you to start back in the fall semester. That gives us about 7 months to get everything in order."
"Can you do that?"
Maya could barely speak. She just nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. That night, one of the businessmen from the restaurant called. His name was Tom, and he sounded nervous on the phone. "I can't stop thinking about the other night," he said, "about how I treated you. I have a daughter your age, and the thought of someone laughing at her like I laughed at you. It's been eating me alive." "It's okay," Maya said, though it hadn't been okay at the time. "It's not okay, but I want to try to make it right." He took a breath. "My company wants to start a scholarship fund for young musicians who are facing hardship. We want to call it the Maya Chen Music Scholarship. If you'll let us use your name." Maya was speechless. "We can't change what happened to you," Tom continued, "but maybe we can help make sure it doesn't happen to other kids. What do you think?" "I think that would be amazing," Maya managed to say. Word about what happened at Bella Nade had started to spread. Mr. Romano had told a few friends. Those friends had told others. Someone had recorded the standing ovation on their phone and posted it online. It wasn't a clear video, and you could barely see Maya in it, but you could hear the applause and the emotion in people's voices. The video went viral, not in a huge way, but enough that local news stations started calling. They wanted to do stories about the homeless girl who played violin for dinner and touched everyone's hearts. Dr. Park was protective. She turned down most of the interview requests. "Maya needs time to heal and adjust," she told reporters. "This isn't a feel-good story for the evening news. This is a child who survived something traumatic." But she did agree to one interview with a local reporter, who promised to handle the story sensitively. The segment aired on a Tuesday evening, and Maya watched it from the couch in Dr. Park's living room, curled up under a blanket with hot tea. The reporter told her story with respect and dignity. They interviewed Mr. Romano, who got emotional talking about that night. They interviewed the businessmen, who all admitted they'd been wrong to judge her. They interviewed Dr. Park, who talked about the importance of helping vulnerable youth. And at the end, there was footage of Maya playing her violin, not from the restaurant, but from a recording Dr. Park had made in their living room. Maya played the same Vivaldi piece, but this time she wasn't shaking from cold and hunger. This time she played with pure joy. The segment ended with information about Tom's new scholarship fund and resources for people who wanted to help homeless youth in Chicago. Maya's phone, a basic one James had bought her the day after the restaurant, started buzzing with messages. Former teachers from Juilliard reaching out, musicians she'd studied with sending support. Even some of her old school friends, who'd lost touch after her parents died, were getting back in contact. But the message that meant the most came from Mr. Romano. It was simple and short. "Come by the restaurant Friday night. Not to play, just to eat with us, like family." Maya looked at Dr. Park, who was reading over her shoulder. "Can we go?" "Of course we can go," Dr. Park said, squeezing her shoulder. "That's what Friday nights are for. Dinner with family." Maya leaned against her, feeling safe and warm, and for the first time in 6 months, like she might actually have a future again. The road ahead was still long. There would be legal appointments and counseling sessions and hard days where the grief would hit her all over again. But she wasn't facing it alone anymore. And that made all the difference. 3 months passed in what felt like both a blur and the slowest days of Maya's life. The legal process of Dr. Park and James becoming her guardians took longer than anyone expected. There were background checks and home visits and mountains of paperwork. But finally, on a rainy Tuesday in May, a judge signed the papers and it was official. Maya had a family again. She'd started counseling twice a week with a therapist who specialized in grief and trauma. The first few sessions were hard, really hard. Maya had spent so long just trying to survive that she'd pushed all her feelings down deep, where they couldn't hurt her. Now she had to pull them all back up and look at them. She cried a lot in those sessions. She talked about her parents and how much she missed them. She talked about the guilt she felt for being alive when they weren't. She talked about the shame of being homeless, of being hungry, of being invisible to people who walked past her every day. "There's no shame in needing help," her therapist told her. "There's no shame in struggling. You survived, Maya. That took incredible strength." Slowly, week by week, Maya started to believe it. She practiced her violin every day in the music room Dr. Park had set up for her. It was a small room at the back of the house with good acoustics and a comfortable chair. Dr. Park had even found a better violin for her, a beautiful instrument from a shop downtown. But Maya still kept her father's old violin in its case nearby. She wasn't ready to let it go. Her playing changed during those months. It was technically perfect, like always. But now there was something deeper in it, something that came from having survived the worst and come out the other side. When she played sad pieces, people felt the sadness in their bones. When she played joyful pieces, it was like sunshine breaking through clouds, Dr. Park noticed. "You're not just playing music anymore," she said one evening, listening from the doorway. "You're telling stories. You're sharing pieces of your soul." Maya smiled. "That's what my dad always said music should be." The scholarship fund that Tom and his colleagues had started grew bigger than anyone expected. They raised over $200,000 in the first 2 months. They gave the first scholarship to a 17-year-old boy from the south side of Chicago, who played saxophone but couldn't afford music school. At the award ceremony, Maya met him and they talked for hours about music and dreams and second chances. "You gave me hope," he told her. "When I heard your story, I realized maybe my dream wasn't impossible after all." That's when Maya realized something important. Her story wasn't just her story anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever felt invisible or worthless or forgotten. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been told they didn't matter. Mr. Romano kept his promise. Maya ate at Bellinata every Friday night and he never let her pay. She'd become friends with his mother, who taught her Italian phrases and told her stories about growing up in Sicily. The old woman had lost her own parents young, so she understood Maya's grief in a way that most people couldn't. "The pain never completely goes away," she told Maya one evening, holding her hand across the table. "But it changes. It becomes something you carry with you like a stone in your pocket. Some days it feels heavy. Some days you forget it's there. But it's always part of you, and that's okay." Summer came, and with it, Maya's 15th birthday. Dr. Park and James threw her a small party at the house. They invited Mr. Romano and his family, Tom and some of the other people from the restaurant, Maya's therapist, and a few students from Northwestern that Dr. Park mentored. It wasn't a huge celebration, but it was filled with people who genuinely cared about her, people who'd shown up when she needed them. Maya blew out the candles on her cake and made a wish. Not for fame or success or anything big, just for this feeling to last. This feeling of being safe and loved and home. As summer turned to fall, Maya prepared to return to Juilliard. She was nervous in a way she hadn't been before. The first time she'd gone there, she'd been a kid with a dream, and parents who believed in her. Now she was going as someone who'd lost everything and had to claw her way back. "What if I'm not good enough anymore?" she asked Dr. Park the night before they were supposed to drive to New York for orientation. "What if I've lost too much time?" Dr. Park sat down next to her on the bed. "Maya, you played one of the most technically difficult pieces in classical music in a restaurant corner, while you were literally starving. And you played it perfectly. You didn't lose your talent. If anything, you gained something most musicians spend their whole lives trying to find. What's that? The ability to make people feel something real. To connect with your audience on a human level. That's not something you can teach. That's something you have to live." The drive to New York was long but beautiful. Maya watched the landscape change outside the window and thought about the last time she'd made this trip. Crammed in the back of a bus with nothing but her violin and $50 to her name. She'd been going to New York with no plan. Just a desperate hope that somehow she could get back into school. She'd made it about 3 days before she'd run out of money and had to turn back. This time was different. This time she had Dr. Park driving her in a comfortable car. This time she had new clothes and a suitcase full of everything she needed. This time she had a dorm room waiting and a meal plan and a family to come home to on holidays. This time she belonged. Move-in day at Juilliard was chaos. Students and parents everywhere carrying boxes and instruments and excitement. Maya felt overwhelmed until she saw a familiar face. Dean Morrison was standing near the entrance, and when he saw her, he came right over. "Maya," he said warmly, "welcome back. We're so glad to have you here." "Thank you for giving me another chance," Maya said. The dean shook his head. "You earned your place here with your talent. We're just glad we could help make it possible for you to use that talent." He walked with them to Maya's dorm room and helped carry some of her things up the stairs. Other students stared, probably wondering why the dean was helping some random freshman move in. But Maya didn't care. She was too busy taking it all in, hardly believing she was really here. That evening, after Dr. Park and James had left to drive back to Chicago, Maya unpacked her things in her small dorm room. She had a roommate, a piano student from California named Lisa who seemed nice. They talked for a while about their backgrounds and their goals, and Lisa didn't treat Maya any differently when she learned about her story. "That must have been incredibly hard," Lisa said simply. "I'm glad you made it back." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She was too excited, too nervous, too full of emotions to name. She got up quietly, trying not to wake Lisa, and took her father's old violin down to one of the practice rooms. The building was quiet at 2 in the morning. Maya's footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. She let herself into a practice room and turned on just one small lamp in the corner. She played for hours. Not because she had to, not because anyone was listening, not to prove anything or earn anything. She played just because she could, because she was alive and she had survived and she was here, in this place she'd fought so hard to get back to. She played the Vivaldi piece that had changed her life that night at Bellinata. But she also played other pieces. Happy pieces, sad pieces, angry pieces, hopeful pieces. She played until her fingers hurt and her arms were tired. And somewhere in the middle of a particularly beautiful passage, Maya realized something. Her parents would have been so proud of her. Not just for her talent or for getting into Juilliard, but for surviving, for not giving up, for accepting help when she needed it, and for turning her pain into something that could help other people. She thought about that little girl in the restaurant who'd said her playing was the most beautiful thing she'd ever heard. She thought about the boy who got the first scholarship. She thought about all the people who'd seen her story and felt inspired to help someone else. Her music had power. Not just to entertain, but to change things, to remind people to look at each other with compassion instead of judgment, to see the invisible people and recognize their worth. When Maya finally put her violin away and headed back to her dorm room, the sun was starting to rise. She stood at the window and watched the sky turn pink and orange over New York City. She'd asked to play for dinner once, and people had laughed at her. They'd judged her and dismissed her and almost thrown her out. But she'd played anyway. She'd given it everything she had, and that one moment of courage had changed the entire course of her life. Maya touched the window glass, feeling the warmth of the rising sun on her fingertips. She had a long road ahead of her still. Years of training and hard work. Performances and competitions. Setbacks and victories. But she wasn't afraid anymore, because she'd already survived the hardest part. She'd survived losing everything and finding her way back. She'd survived being invisible and finding her voice again. And if she could survive that, she could survive anything. The city was waking up below her, full of people starting their days. Some of them were struggling just like she had been. Some of them felt invisible just like she had felt. But Maya knew now that everyone had a song inside them. Everyone had something valuable to offer. Sometimes all people needed was someone willing to listen. Someone willing to give them a chance. Someone willing to see past the surface to the person underneath. Maya had been given that chance and she wasn't going to waste it. She was going to play her heart out. She was going to tell her story. She was going to remind the world that the people society overlooks often have the most beautiful gifts to share. All they need is someone to ask them to play.